welcome back to a frightening episode of Movie Reel. I'm your host, Kevin Tracy.
And I'm Samantha Tomlinson, and I'm not the best with accents.
Ah, ah, ah.
well said.
Thank you. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Movie Reel. This month I'm very excited since it's going to be October. Now we decided to do an entire month dedicated to vampires. Since we did something kind of special last year for Halloween with History of Horror, we decided to kind of go through kind of the various evolutions of and reiterations of vampires throughout the years. And what better way to start
Yeah,
off than with the original Dracula himself, Bela Lugosi himself, in the 1931 classic Dracula by Universal Studios.
yeah. So it's this, then it's gonna be Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire, and then we end on Twilight. So hitting all the greats.
We really are.
um, yeah. So if anyone remembers from last year, so yeah, we did like it was like a history of horror, just kind of doing a wide variety of different types of like because horror, and we talked about this so much last year. Horror itself is like there's so many subgenres within horror.
It's very
um
subjective.
yes, and you are way more into horror than I am.
Hmm.
I will say last year you did a very good job. I pretty much let you have run of October. You pretty much, you narrow it down and say, okay, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
But I let you have full control, and you kind of won me over last year. I had a lot of fun. No, like, because I just didn't. Part of it was like I think I didn't like horror because like, oh, it's scary, but also I just didn't care. And there are some things in horror that I like. I find like too
yeah.
creepy. But last year I had a lot of fun, and
Yeah.
so
No. Like I.
this will be
It's
interesting.
always really refreshing when you kind of turn someone over into your favorite genre. So it's really I kind of find it to be like a unique challenge to kind of win you over to appreciate horror for what it is rather than just cheap jump scares and goofy masks. There's an art to this genre. Uh, I think more so in horror because it really has to draw on like the base emotions of fear that we all have, and I find that to be such a creative and really kind of fascinating way on how horror movies are able to achieve that. Um, Granted, some of them are kind of cheap, but I feel like
Yeah,
some of the classics, like Dracula, for example, kind of hold the test of time, and it has been probably 20 years since I've last seen this movie.
you so okay. I mean, I assumed you've seen
I
this.
saw this a
Um,
long time ago. I was like maybe like 6 or 7 years old when I first saw this, and I don't think I've seen it since. So this was
does it make you sad at all that you're old enough to say 20 years ago?
not really, but I just think it's kind of
It
I
makes me
honestly I just think it's kind of like bragging rights. Like it's been 20 years since I last seen this, so I like
20 years
yes,
ago.
20 years
Yeah,
ago today I saw
on the
Dracula.
full
Yeah.
moon. Yeah.
No, I just think it's kind of a cool thing to say. Like I'm not like hindered by my own age and like, oh, I just dated myself by saying this. Like that doesn't bother me, or at least it doesn't bother me yet, because like
Yeah.
I'm like 26. Like I'm not that old.
Yeah.
um let's just kind of jump right into it. What were your general expectations with this movie?
Um, I don't really know what I was expecting. I will say it was I was ex- so last year we started off with Nosferatu, and I personally I don't really care. I don't watch a ton of movies in black and white. I'm not against watching black and white movies. I just don't.
Yeah.
Like I there's movies I there are plenty of movies like on my list that I really want to watch that happen to be black and white. Like I look at it more like, oh, it's cool because it's like a historical
Yeah.
thing. Like it's old. They did not have, it was not able to be in
Yeah,
color.
I
That doesn't
yeah, no,
bother
I
me.
that always kind of confuses me that people are like so against watching movies because they're old, and especially because they're in black and white. It's like, oh, I'm not gonna be able to like understand. It's like, no, it's not like it's a foreign movie, and even then, like I can kind of understand people want to avoid like foreign movies because like they don't want to read subtitles or watch like a really bad dub of a movie. They kind of
Yeah,
like
yeah,
kind of makes the movie
yeah,
kind of more goofy, but like for like old black and white movies, I never understood why people are so like have like an aversion to that. It's just like why? It's kind of like a time capsule. This and like
yeah.
Nosferatu especially, it's kind of like a really kind of fascinating of like how it all started off, especially watching something as well known as these movies because you kind of see like where it all started, and then you can kind of compare it to something that you've seen a lot more recently. Like I that's one of the things that I really like about this movie is that you kind of see where a lot of like the tropes and like familiar characters, and you kind of see where like later actors and directors kind of took their inspiration for like, oh, like this guy had this type of like symbol on like his costume. We're gonna add that to our Dracula costume for our movie, and like Dracula Untold or something like that. And it just kind of they kind of take bits and pieces from this to kind of make their own like unique interpretation while still remaining faithful to this, because this is kind of like the go-to interpretation, even though it tells the exact same story that Nosferatu did.
So I think, yeah, I don't really know what I was expecting. I think I was expecting, I definitely, if anyone remembers from last year, Nosferatu, I was just, I was so bored and I had such difficulty watching it. Well, because I should have been more, and I think I said this last year, I should have been more in awe, and maybe on some level I was, of like, wow, this is like, what year was Nosferatu? It was like 1910s. It's the oldest movie I have ever seen. It's
Yeah,
one of,
it was like well over 100 years old, and this one's yeah, this one's 90 years old.
and it's kind of insane to think about that, like about how one, how old some of these movies are, but also how new of an industry this kind of
Yeah.
is, in a sense. Like, but I Nosferatu, I had such difficulty watching. I didn't really know what was going on, and because it was in and again, I don't personally have an issue with things being in black and white, but because of the uh how like new filmmaking was, I couldn't tell. I thought the whole movie was in daytime, which makes no sense, but it wasn't in a way that made it clear that it was night. Like they hadn't figured that how to do that yet, so I was so lost the whole time. This one, I did kind of like realize, oh, it's like Nosferatu, because I even then was mixed up because in Nosferatu, I'm like, wait, is he Nosferatu? Is he Count Dracula? And they said Nosferatu in the very beginning of this movie, and then can you explain that to me? So Dracula is
So
Nosferatu, or that's just
so
like,
originally Nosferatu was is basically just a retelling of the book Dracula by Bram Stoker, however
mhm.
you pronounce it.
I think it's Bram,
I've
but
heard
I,
it different ways, but anyway, it's a
yeah,
retelling of the classic story Dracula, but I think midway through production or like before production, they didn't get the rights through the Stoker estate to use that. It wasn't. I guess it wasn't public domain figure yet, so they had to change a lot of the character names and locations, primarily Dracula himself. So they changed it to there's this is the part that's confusing to me is that they've changed it over the years to like, oh, his name's like Count Orlok, his name is Nosferatu, or like, but I think Nosferatu is just like a just Count Dracula in a different language, but it was different enough that it was able to get by without them being in any legal trouble. And then they also had like Mina Harker and John Harker, who were like the primary characters of the book in Dracula. So it kind of was like a legal uh like tennis match of them going back and forth between what was okay and what they could use and what they couldn't use. So it was really confusing. And then there's different versions where like, oh, this character's called this, but he's called this instead in this version. So it's kind of hard to follow, and it kind of depends on what version you've actually seen. Because I think we had the same conversation last year where you saw a different
Yeah,
version than what I saw, because they called him like Count Dracula, and in mine they called him Count Orlok, or vice versa. I don't remember.
I think maybe it was Orlok. I don't know, but I just remember I kept hearing two. There was two different names. I'm like, why is it called Nosferatu if they're calling him something
Yeah.
else? What's Nos? Like, that's what made no sense. And this time they said the Nosferatu, and I'm like, oh, maybe that's just like the monster, the general name, and they don't like it's not 100%. It's suspected to be Count Dracula. There was enough in there that I was able to like kind of figure it out, but like it wasn't as big of a deal. This movie was much easier to follow.
Oh, absolutely.
Um, I don't know enough about the original story, but I recognize like, oh, is Mina was Mina in
Yes,
Nosferatu?
that's yeah, Mina Harker, who is John Harker's wife, who works for like a basically he's basically a real estate agent, and he's sent from England to Transylvania.
Oh,
Well,
Renfield
in this one it's
is
Renfield.
in this one. Oh, okay. So in Nosferatu, the husband was that guy.
Yes. So in this,
Okay,
yeah,
okay,
in
okay,
the
okay.
story, Renfield is basically like Dracula's like servant, his like slave. Um, so I think this one they kind of gave it like a weird flip. They kind of switched John Harker and Renfield's positions. It's the exact same story. They just kind of flipped those characters. So it's kind of like in a sense a prequel to the book of Dracula, as well as a interpretation of Dracula. It's
This one, the one we
yes, the
just
one we
watched.
just watched is a prequel to
Yes.
itself, while still being an interpretation of the book that
Okay.
it's telling. So
So
so yeah, it's more or less kind of like
yeah,
it's
okay.
more or less how Renfield came under the services of Count Dracula, because he is sent in instead of John Harker to uh, settle the deal of like selling property to Count Dracula in London, so he can move there and so he can have new blood. Essentially, is the primary story, is that he wants to move there so he can feast on the people there.
Okay. Um I will say this movie was so it was much obviously being much easier to follow. It it kept and mainly because of the setting, it kept making me think of Young Frankenstein.
Yeah, I definitely had like those moments as well. It's like, what
Just like the
knockers?
castle, like um like I don't know if Dracula asked Renfield if he wanted like Ovaltine, I
Yeah.
would have been like ah, but it kind of it was um like modern enough that it kind of made me think of a movie that's also old from like what the 70s.
I don't
Um,
remember off the top of my head.
some I want to say and probably I think it's 70s. Anyway, regardless, um, so I will say when you were talking about Renfield, this is I think there were two main things about this movie, uh, that about the
Yeah.
story in particular that I really noticed, and one was that there's no for it's called Dracula,
Yes.
yet you can't really convince me that Dracula's the main character. It kind of seemed like there was no main character. It's just a story being told and here are all the players. There wasn't particularly I mean, yes, there is an
Oh,
antagonist. Dracula
yes.
is the antagonist, but there's not really I'm like, is he the main character? At first I thought Renfield was gonna be the main character, then I thought it was gonna be Dracula. Then it's like then
John
it
Harker
shifts to
and Van
like it
Helsing.
shifts to so John and it like it shifts so much that I'm like it there wasn't really a protagonist. Everyone was just kind of they were contributing to the
Everyone
story,
had
but
like
it
an
was
equal
like
part to play. I felt like in this movie.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's a good way to put it. But I just thought that was funny. I was expecting it. I think, I think actually, this movie made me think of two things. It made me think of Young Frankenstein, and it made me think of Blackula,
okay, no,
which
I see that.
which he is, but he is very much. It's the same. Well, if that was more of like he sees a woman who looks like exactly like the woman he like fell in love with, who was
Yeah,
his wife, or whatever, and then that there's more of a reason for why he's like into this and kind of infatuated with this girl. But here it doesn't. The thing is, so this is so Dracula's played by Bela Lugosi.
the legendary
I
actor
don't
himself.
know that much about him. Like I know the name,
Okay,
but
so before they even casted Bela Lugosi for this role, they originally wanted Lon Chaney Sr. for this role of Dracula, but unfortunately he died before they managed to agree to it. And then Bela Lugosi, who I believe up until this point had only done stage acting before, and he had done stage acting for the play interpretation of Dracula, so he's been the role of
oh,
Dracula like hundreds of times by this point. So he was like,
oh my
so he
gosh,
was very much willing to accept this role. Except the only way that they convinced him to get the role because he has a very thick accent. He moved to America 10 years before he got this movie in 1921, and in the process of that, he learned English, but he still had that very heavy accent that carried on into the movie that kind of adds to his like charm a bit because it's kind of like, oh, it's like kind of mysterious. You don't quite know where he's from. Um,
yeah.
the only way that he can convince the producers to have him be on there because of his accent is if they severely cut his pay. So over the process of 10 weeks of them filming this, they agreed to pay him $500 a week for 10 weeks. So he only got $5,000 for playing one of the most iconic roles in horror history. That's all the money that he made, as far as I am aware of, for contributing to this movie. And yeah,
I mean, that probably valued more than in like this came out what
yeah,
1931, so they
1931. But I mean, even
probably
with inflation, $5,000 now doesn't. It's that probably isn't as
yeah, it's
much.
like yeah,
um, like
yeah.
I'm sure it was still like a substantial amount then, but for what he actually did, that seems like a huge pay cut. But it is what it is. I mean, there wasn't really a whole lot that he could do, but it got him in the door because, as far as I know, this was his first role in film. He might have done like a couple other like like parts in it. The only thing that this movie kind of did for him, though, which kind of shot him in the foot, is that it severely typecasted him, and he pretty much only got pretty much exclusively like horror roles since then. Like he reprised his role as Dracula a few times after this. He was Frankenstein alongside Boris Karloff, who was the original
Oh,
Frankenstein.
he was in the original so he was in Island of Lost Souls, which was the original version of was it Isle of Dr. Moreau.
I believe so.
Okay. He was playing Nine from Outer
Yes,
Space.
that
That's
that
why I'm like, I know
that
that
was.
name. I
I
can't think
think that
of
was his
why.
last.
That's
Yeah,
very
that was his.
high on my bad movie
That
list that I
yeah,
really
that
want to
was. I
watch.
believe that was his last movie before he passed away. I think he passed away during the filming of that. That's why he's only in
Oh,
like I think he's only in like two scenes in that entire movie, like pretty early on in the beginning. But yeah, if you look at his IMDb page, it's pretty much like 98% just straight horror movies, which that's not a bad thing.
yeah.
He was very good at what he did. In some cases, he managed to be on like equal terms or even upstage Boris Karloff, who was the original narrator and voice of the Grinch in the original Grinch cartoon, as
Oh.
well as Frankenstein and many others. He is a phenomenal actor, and there were multiple times where Bela Lugosi was able to be on equal terms with him or just outright outstaged him in a scene that they shared together. They had like a very electric chemistry on set. They were both very well-spoken actors.
Who did the wait? Who is the other
Boris
person?
Karloff.
Well, who did he was
No,
in this
he
movie?
was the original Frankenstein. I'm just talking about like their
Oh,
other roles that they did.
okay. Oh,
But yeah,
okay,
no,
okay.
they were just phenomenal actors for their time, and in my opinion, we haven't really
Hmm.
had like as iconic horror icons as those two. Like, Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff, and Lon Chaney Jr. pretty much made horror as it is today.
And 1931 though, so this is when the movie
Yes.
came out. I don't remember the exact. Do you remember we talked about it in school. I don't remember what years it was exactly, but I know it was somewhere around this time. So there was a period of time. Obviously, this is years and years before we have like ratings on movies. Movies are just
Yeah.
movies. They're kind of just for everyone. There's not really rated like for kids or
Yeah.
families, whatever. That's not really a thing yet. And but there was a period of time where there was like the pre-code and then there was like post-code or the code. So basically when they started implementing like you couldn't show certain things. I find that funny because this movie kept just showing like we were cutting away or just seeing Dracula bend down to like bite someone, but we're not really seeing
Yeah.
much of it. It was like going out of its way to like cut
It
to the
in
next thing. And I think that happened. I feel like this falls right in the middle of
yeah.
that.
Well, in terms of like the rating and like the code system, I think this was still kind of like around the time where like individual like cities or counties kind of did like generally did like their own rating, and that usually kind of fell on like uh the responsibility of like some like local like community service or like general like welfare committee that usually had some like church affiliation. So it pretty much I think this one was probably as widespread as it was because it does depict like crucifixes and like crosses is like, oh, like this has like a pro Christian message, so it was probably I feel like
Mm,
that probably contributed to why this movie is as widespread as it is, because it kind of got like that early kind of jump that I don't think a lot of horror movies did, and it was based off of a very well-known book, so that also probably factored into its popularity as well. Um, yeah,
I'm just thinking like I know it wasn't there. That wasn't. It wasn't like how people, including myself, line up waiting hours and hours for a book adaptation, and like at this point, I doubt people were really
no,
caring. It was more like, wow, a
yeah,
moving
well,
picture.
yeah, well, I think more of the excitement was this is a talking movie because this is 1931. This is
Yes.
like one of like the few movies that actually had audio that wasn't just music, which I kind of made this movie feel a bit slow at times because there is very little musical
Oh,
accompaniment with this movie, and a lot of the um, performances are kind of hammy because talking movies were still very new. They didn't really know how to do movie acting. People were still kind of doing stage acting, and that is abundantly clear with Bela Lugosi. But he kind of gives it
yes.
a unique spin enough to that he makes this role his own that people have been mimicking for 90 years since then. He manages to enthrall you not just as an actor but like with his like accent, the way he's enunciating certain words. It's almost hypnotic, almost like he's hypnotizing you himself as Dracula to be more invested in the performance. And it's kind of hard not to want to like do more of like a deep dive into like his movie library. I literally like after watching this like, okay, I I literally went on Amazon and just bought a bunch of like old like Universal like monster movies because I haven't seen them in like a
Oh my
long
god.
time, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, I need to rewatch these because these are great.
I really quick, I want to jump back to what you said about the lack of music,
Yes.
because that was my other thing about this movie, was the fact that there wasn't an obvious protagonist. Everyone was, like you said, kind of had a everyone was kind of
Yes.
equal, and which wasn't really an I don't even know if it was quite an issue. It was more of just like, I mean, I was definitely not rooting for Dracula,
Well,
because for me there was no clear reason other than like why he was so infatuated with Mina and so determined to make
yeah.
her his wife, or his other wife, because he has
Yes, he
three
has three
others. But
wives.
anyway, the but the lack of music, I just found, I'm like, and I don't know. I'm like, have they? You can't. They haven't figured that out yet. I don't remember when. I feel like they have. I don't remember when music
Well, I
became
mean,
more embedded into
well,
film yet.
music was
But
always kind of like a thing with film. Like in silent movies, like that was like the
yeah, that's why.
entire sound was just music. So like I think they had some music in like certain scenes, but for the most part, just like as like background noise, like kind of have something there.
It was more of like there because that's what's happening in the
Yeah,
scene.
exactly.
Like it's like the scene where they're at the
Yeah,
theater,
exactly. That
like that the
yeah,
music's
yeah, that's pretty
playing.
much it.
Like yeah, and it just so music. The biggest reason for music is because it's kind of telling the audience how to feel, and but sometimes the lack of music, so silence, can also be a good indicator of how you're supposed to feel, because it's when you hear nothing, it makes it
Yeah.
creepy. It makes it like you don't know what to
Wh-
expect.
which I feel
Um
like the lack of music, there were certainly times where I feel like music definitely would have like amplified
oh
the
yeah.
the scene itself, but the general lack of music, I feel like overall kind of enhanced this movie to kind of give it more of like a creepy atmosphere and more foreboding. It's like, oh, like what's gonna happen to him? Like nothing's happening, you know?
I agree with you. For there's a couple of, like, I think particularly the first time we meet Dracula and his wives and they all just are coming out of their coffins. Like, I do think that it did kind of, no music enhanced it. I agree for definitely some of it, but there were quite a few scenes where it's like music would have been really helpful, just to add
Yeah,
something.
like especially kind of like towards the end because I feel like
Yeah,
the
the
first yeah
ending,
the first act
like
I feel like is pretty perfect in my opinion. It's pretty spot on from what I remember. Like even as a kid, like I remember like that bit, like the beginning of like him going to the castle and like him meeting Dracula. Like I remember thinking Bela Lugosi was like the creepiest guy alive. Like that guy just scared the crap out of me. Like his look, the way he acted, he was just very like stiff but suave. If that makes any sense, he was just like he was like you
yeah.
like I honestly don't know how to describe it. It was just very unsettling but oddly like approachable. Like like
Oh
you
yeah,
wanted to be his
yeah.
friend, but at the same time you're like super like sketch of this guy. But like yeah, like but
Actually, yeah. That scene where he brings Renfield to his room. So Renfield has business at Castle Dracula,
yeah,
and
and
everyone's like, oh,
all the locals freak out. It's like Castle Dracula, and like some ladies like doing the sign of the cross.
and he takes him. He arrives after midnight and like takes him into his room, and he then we see him like go into like some other room
Oh,
through a random door.
real quick, did you realize that the stagecoach driver was also Bela Lugosi?
I don't, huh? I feel like maybe I saw that and I didn't think that much of it. That doesn't surprise me. That sounds right.
Yeah.
That sounds accurate. Um, but I think, yeah, that was the other young Frankenstein moment I had. But also the when he, like I was just saying, they're in Renfield's room, and and there's like, I guess, another door. We don't go through it, but Dracula goes through it, and I was hearing the Young Frankenstein music, and the part where she's like, "He was my boyfriend." That's all I was thinking about. I just was thinking like, I wish Mel Brooks was here. Like, um, um, but I want to talk about Renfield because
I thought he
he,
was like the best actor in this.
I
Up
okay,
next to Bela Lugosi, he was like one of the best performances.
Bela Lugosi. I'm kind of we'll talk about it in a minute. You're
Okay.
you're probably correct about his performance. I didn't think he gave a bad performance. I just thought like the character of Dracula to me was just weird and bizarre. Which yes, he's probably supposed to be. He's a
Yeah.
vampire,
He's
but yeah, the
500 years
guy who
old. He's not with the
yeah
times.
yeah. But the guy who was Renfield, he was acting his ass off. Like holy crap! Like he this is what I didn't understand. So and he's Dracula's being, weird. Shocker giving him like he's like wine and he's like, delicious. And I'm like, is it? And at first I'm
Yeah.
like, is this like underworld rules? Like you can't and by underworld I don't mean the movie, I mean like Greek mythology are like, can you eat stuff? Can you not eat stuff? Like if you eat stuff we have to stay? Is there something going on? And
Oh,
then
okay.
in the next that was my first thought. I actually thought about that too. Like I knew I was gonna have to specify the type of underworld I meant.
Yeah, it's like I don't remember eating being a thing with like a Kate Beckinsale movie.
but anyway, because in like the next scene, and like later, Renfield's acting super weird, and he's like locked up, and he needs to eat bug. He feels he needs to eat like insects to survive, and I'm like, wait, is he a vampire? Is he like in the process of turning into one? Like, what is the
so
deal with him?
so
And I never really felt like I got a lot of clarity on that.
so Renfield, from what I remember, he isn't a vampire. He's basically just like Dracula's like thrall. He is like his human slave, um, which it kind
The
of
Benny to his Emotep.
essentially, yeah, that
Yeah,
is
okay.
a pretty spot on analogy there, Sam.
That's what I was thinking
Um,
of when I was watching this.
yeah, no, that he's basically Benny. I well, shit, there you
Except
go.
less of an asshole.
Yeah, less
A
of an
little.
asshole and like
Yeah, actually he's not really an asshole.
no,
He's
he
just
he re-
weird.
no, he just yeah, he's an odd duck, but I mean that he doesn't like really go do anything like malicious or like intentionally hurtful to anyone, or at least not that I
He's
can.
trying to actually he keeps trying to warn them, sort of, but also like then Dracula comes and he's like, I'm loyal to you, haha.
Yeah,
Like come on.
um,
Pick a team.
yeah, but so kind of going back to you saying that like everyone kind of like it doesn't primarily focus on like any one character. That is pretty close to the book because the book is more or less just kind of like a bunch of like journal entries and like newspaper entries, and it kind of changes perspective like multiple times in the book, so it makes sense that it doesn't really take the main perspective of like any one character, because I think there were even like a couple times
Yeah.
in the movie where it kind of just cuts to like random b-roll of like a newspaper clipping. It was like, oh, like several people have gone missing, like police clueless, and like a couple other like stuff like that, if I'm
Yeah.
remembering correctly. So it doesn't really have like the same like direct translation from like the book to the movie, but I feel like that was like the best the movie could do in terms of like, oh, like according to this
Yeah.
journal entry this happened, or according to like this diary page that this person wrote 20 years ago this happened, and it kind of worked a little bit with like the constant like changing of like focus and like introducing all these new characters. um so I felt like they kind of worked for this movie without it
I think
being
that is
super
something.
confusing.
What when was Dracula written? That does sound very much like a 17 or 1800 style. Like I remember like last year I read the book Phantom of the Opera and it kind of did the same
Oh,
thing.
you read
Um
that?
yeah, yeah, I did. But
Okay.
um like well actually I just thought it was funny though because it was kind of doing the same thing. It was jumping around, which I would have actually I don't even know what I would have preferred because it spent most of its time on the character that most people in Phantom of the Opera hate. So I just was like, okay, is he the main character? I still don't know. So
so
anyway,
yeah. So, to answer your
yeah.
question, Dracula was published in 1897.
Okay, so yeah, that does sound very much like an
So
1800s.
like roughly
Yeah.
like I don't know, like 35 years before this movie came out.
Okay. Yeah.
So not terribly old, but it was old enough for
No,
it
no,
to still
no.
be popular.
Yeah. So, and also, actually, let's. This might be a good time to talk about Bela Lugosi because I
Yes.
know you kind of talked about, but because I think I do agree with you that the acting is, again, this is 1931,
Yeah.
and they've just, okay, like, talkies were kind of established in the like 20s, late 20s. I don't remember the exact year.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact year either. And from
But I
actually
am.
from what I remember, it like some sources are actually like kind of contradict each other. It's like, oh, like some of them started like there were like reports of like talking pictures in like 1927, and then like, oh no, it was like 1929. It's like, okay, like which.
It was the 20s. It was for sure the 20s.
Yeah, it was
That
like that.
that
Yeah,
much we know.
yeah,
Yeah.
like we
But
have it narrowed down to the decade, but like like apparently like sources like argue on like the specific year from what I've come across.
it does kind of blow my mind because again, this is 1931, and movies like Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind, which are in color, those are going to come within the next like 8 years,
Yeah,
which I find like so which is just it's just kind of interesting to me how
how fast it
like
progressed.
yes, exactly, like even like if you watch like the original Snow White, like Disney Snow White, and then you watch Pinocchio, there's a 2 year difference, but holy crap, like the detail in Pinocchio versus Snow White, it's like unbelievable how quickly um it
Yeah,
yeah, it progressed.
yeah,
And I think
and you also don't get a lot of like the recycled animation that that the
not yet.
not yet, not yet, but give it some time.
Yeah, yeah. It's not Robin Hood, aka the movie, Robin Hood, the movie of recycled animation.
Oh yeah.
But anyway,
So what
or no,
was
recycled animation, the movie.
yeah,
Anyway, that's what.
so was this your like first movie with like Bela Lugosi? Like was this like kind of like your introduction?
Yes,
Okay. So
and
yeah.
I knew the name, but I don't think I don't think. I think the only thing I had heard him in, I think I maybe knew he was Dracula. I think the only other thing I heard him in was Plan 9, and I wasn't sure if that was him. I don't know why I didn't just look it up. But of course, I love bad movies, so of course I was somehow I'm a little bit aware of Plan 9. But anyway, I thought like I agree. I think he actually did do a great job. It was just it's very much I agree with you that acting has is still very theatrical.
Yeah.
Like it's not and it's not like that's the thing though I can understand. I can understand people not liking older movies like this because the acting is so different than what we're used to. That I can get because that can sometimes be hard to watch. I didn't really think any of the performances in this were necessarily bad. They were fine. For them, yeah, they were fine for the most part. I
Yeah.
didn't really have any major complaints.
No, like
Oh,
everyone seemed to have like some kind of purpose to be in the movie, and I felt like some of the performances were a bit hammy. Like I felt like Renfield at times was a bit over the top, but
yes,
I felt like they kind of worked for
it
his
worked.
character. But
Yeah,
yeah, and Bela
I agree.
Lugosi kind of had like this like grandiose kind of style of projecting that was definitely more appropriate for stage acting rather than movie acting, but I felt like it translated well for his character because he is kind of like Dracula does think that he is like above like the peons of humans because they are nothing but food to him for the most part.
I did think I did think it was funny when he's just like walking down the street and the thing is he is technically he's a count. So he's wearing were his clothes with the times or were they older because to me he just screams
I
vampire,
I
but
don't know, and
that trope does not exist
yeah,
yet.
I honestly don't know enough about 1930s fashion in England, so I cannot comment on that. All I can comment is that Bela Lugosi was so attached to the role of Dracula that when he eventually passed away, they buried him with the original cape that he wore for this movie. And to this day, he is still buried with the original Dracula's cape.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's sad and creepy. Um,
The more you know.
but but also like, and I mean, he played Dracula obviously so many times. But do you think part of him is just like, I can't shake
I
it.
I
I
it
can't shake this
I do
character.
think it's kind of
Or
I do
yeah,
think it's kind of a shame that he was like in he's in my opinion he was like the most typecasted actor in history because after this
okay,
movie he pretty
yeah,
much just could not escape uh the role of just like any horror movie outside of that. He pretty much just couldn't break that entire genre as far as I know. Um, because pretty much after that he was always either Dracula or he played Frankenstein. He played Dracula. He
yeah,
played
that guy.
Dracula's hunchback assistant. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
he was
yeah.
just everything that you can think of as, associated with horror. He pretty much was that in some way or another, and I think he was like one of like the main people that kind of helped develop like the tropes that we see a lot of that we kind of associate with like a lot of like classic horror movies of like oh like
That doesn't
yeah
surprise
like
me.
like the mad scientist like the eccentric count like the Frankenstein monster kind of like walking with like his arms stretched out that we see a lot in movies that pretty much everyone imitates. Um, which yeah, it's
Yeah,
just kind of interesting and kind of sad that he was so severely typecasted because he's a phenomenal actor and I would have loved to have seen him in something a little bit more like a drama or like an
yeah.
action movie or like literally not well maybe not an action movie um but like literally
Fast Tokyo Drift starring Bella Lugosi.
and he still has the Dracula cape and everything. You're going to bite my dust, ah.
um, so I think you could tell he got into his role, like his mannerisms, everything, the way he moved, the way he spoke. Um, it was great. I think for me, there were a lot of moments in the movie where it happens with Renfield in particular, but it happens with a couple other people where he's just staring at them and the camera just does this close up on his face and it just cuts back and forth
Yeah, no,
and with no music, it's really weird.
it's
Like,
yeah, no, like that's probably like one of like the most more iconic moments and screenshots of the movie of just like the close up of like Bela Lugosi's face, and you kind of just see like a little bit of light around his eyes, and that's more or less just like him either like staring someone down or like trying to like hypnotize them because that's like one of the powers that
yeah.
Dracula has, um, which I think it's kind of cool that they kind of like expand a bit more on like all the abilities that like Dracula has. Like he can turn into like a wolf, he can turn into bats, he can turn into mist, he can turn into like a bunch of different rats, he can hypnotize people, he can do like all these things. He has like mild telepathy, I guess, because he can just like open doors on a whim without touching them, or at least he can in his castle. Um, which it's kind of cool that they just kind of like make him seem like this like unstoppable supernatural force that only like a select few Van Helsing kind of know about and are able to kind of counter that with science and like other like religious superstitions.
Yeah, I think yeah, cuz I feel like every movie I or every anything I've seen with vampires, it's never been the same. I don't think I've ever seen the same thing twice. Or not twice, but just like it's altered or there's something else that I had never heard
Yeah.
of. And this one, okay, they use a lot of like they talk about wolfsbane a lot. And it's like, is that a real like I mean, vampires are real that we know of. But like, is that a real like
Wolf
thing
Wolf
to ward off vampires? Because I've
yeah,
heard
that's one
like
of like the
it's
OG like vampire
okay.
repellents is like wolfsbane, which I believe is a plant, and
Yes,
a lot of people associate that with werewolves because of the name of wolfsbane, and I think that also is like a deterrent for werewolves. But
but that's
it's
the
been a
other thing
while
is
since I've seen a werewolf movie, so I don't remember.
they say that sometimes Dracula and his because he's also turns into a bat a lot,
Yes.
and it's just like a thing, like with his arm, with his like wings
Yeah.
flapping, but but
It's
it's just on a
it's it's
string. It's like a
it's
puppet.
literally just like a rubber bat on a string that they're just kind of dangling up and down. It's the most hokey thing in the movie, and I absolutely love it.
That was the best. That bat gave one hell of a
Oh,
performance.
100%.
Yeah. Um. But um. Yeah, and but there was a point to say like, oh, he and his wives, they sometimes disguise themselves as wolves. I'm like, what? Is that a vampire
Yeah.
thing? That I've never heard of that either. So like, so then they can turn into wolves, but they're not werewolves.
No, they can just turn into just like a giant wolf, basically, or just a wolf that just seems a bit
Why
bigger.
not?
Yeah, no, but that's pretty much just
Okay.
like an original thing that vampires can do, and they can also like turn into like mist to kind of like disappear. Or they can turn into like basically just like a small swarm of rats and just like do that. Which I think that was a thing in this movie, but they cut that. Um, that
This this was, I will say, my biggest thing about Dracula that bothered me, because I feel like even though kids, yeah, that like, okay, they, so let's say he did cut, maybe he could turn into a wolf, he could do, I can understand they can't show all that, like obviously that's fine, I don't need to see it, they're saying it, which under normal circumstances I would have been like, show don't tell, but they probably could not do that. But
yeah,
I think my biggest issue with Dracula himself was he I think he nailed it, the performance, everything external was incredible. The problem is, who is Dracula? Why is he trying to do, why is he so obsessed with turning Mina into his wife? Why is he like, what will he has 3 wives. Why does he need a fourth?
because
Why does he have three?
uh,
Why
I
did, like, I just felt like what his purpose was not in the movie at all. It's just, oh, he's a vampire, he's bad. Okay.
yeah,
Like,
so that actually kind of reminds me of well, I actually have an answer for you, and then I remember hearing like this joke that basically Dracula is like the original like undead pimp of of like movies. So there's
I'm picturing him walking with like a fur
yeah,
jacket and a hat.
and a can and everything.
Like he's dressed like Frankie, was it Frankie Mermaid or something in Velocipaster?
Okay, I don't even I
Was
I,
that his
I don't
name?
remember. But yeah, there was basically that, and in terms of like his like motivation, I don't remember what his motivation was for trying to like make Mina Harker his like fourth bride. If that was in the book or like in the movie, I think it was just he was just so enthralled by her beauty, or she looked like his like original like love before he turned. I honestly don't remember. I can't speculate on that.
Yeah, and I'm
Um,
like, I can understand that being in the book, but like, because I was thinking like how, like I said, like in Blackula, there's a reason why he's obsessed with this woman, and even like in, did you read Frankenstein in high school?
No, no, we did not read that in high school, unfortunately. We just
Like
got a lot of
he's,
Romeo and Juliet.
oh, I mean that was a
A
lot of it.
lot.
We read that freshman year, and then we
Yeah, we
moved
got
on.
that, and then we got a lot of John Green. So we had to read Fault in Our Stars, and
You guys read John
yeah,
Green in
I don't know
high
why.
school?
Our teacher was just a
Why
really big
couldn't I go
fan.
to this high
I
school?
I did.
Anyway, okay.
None of the guys wanted to read that shit. I hated that book. That was the
Anyway,
most pretentious book I've ever fucking read. I hate Fault in Our Stars. I don't care how much hate I get for that.
okay.
Sorry,
Anyway,
I did not like
um,
that book at all.
like in Frankenstein, I mean, I guess I don't. It's been a while. Obviously, it's been like 10 years since I've read it, but there's, again, a purpose to the monster, and he wants to make the doctor pay. He makes it very clear, like, I'm gonna, if you and I want to say her name's Elizabeth. If you guys get married, I'm gonna find you and I'm gonna kill her. Like, he makes it very clear because he's angry at the doctor. Like, there's a reason for what he's doing, and I can totally believe that. Yes, in the book, it was just, it frustrated me that it it felt like they didn't give a reason because they
Yeah.
thought it wasn't, oh well, we have monster trying to attack pretty woman, that's all we need.
I mean,
And
that's pretty much all you really need for an old
yeah,
horror movie. You
and
didn't
I
really
get
need,
it, but
yeah.
it would have made it more him more interesting, because the thing is, Dracula, while his performance was great, he was kind of boring.
Well, I mean, for the most part, like he was written to be the antagonist. He didn't need to be interesting. He just needed to be frightening and creepy. That was pretty much all the character development that they needed to give him. So the fact that they made
Okay.
him, I hear what you're
Yeah.
saying, and I
Yeah.
completely agree with you. I'm just saying this is why it happened the way it did, as far as I know,
Yeah.
which is problematic for the time. Even for the time, that is a problematic way to do a movie, to just make
And
them
yeah,
creepy for no reason, to when you can make them so much more of a well-rounded character, which I think, because Bela Lugosi made such an outstanding performance with this role, is one of the reasons why it stands out a lot more than a lot of the other interpretations of Dracula throughout the years.
I
Because
just
there's a,
think
yeah.
it's yeah. I just think it's funny because I feel like we've had this same kind of conversation about villains. I think when we were talking about Joker, like
Yeah, that was like one of our
I'm
first episodes.
I and I don't, again, because yeah, you don't. It depends on the way the character's presented and the character's written, because sometimes there's no their charisma and the performance is so, everything about them is so great that there isn't really room for the why. As an audience member, you don't care why. And I think it and I but I think part of it was because, again, this movie is very old. It was also,
Very
everything
short.
about it's very short. It was an hour
It's
and
an hour and
15.
15 minutes. Yeah.
But like, I kind of feel like it's like a mix. Like, he did give a great performance, but because it did feel, to me, it felt kind of empty without music. There were just places where, and I'm trying to think of like, when would we have gotten that information? The story didn't really go in a place, in a direction where we could have gotten information on why he's trying to do this. So I can give, yeah, I agree with you. I can give it credit. Like, we didn't need it, but because the movie, to me, like, I'm trying to think, like, because I think I said this when we talked about Joker,
Yeah.
right? My example for this is in Sleeping Beauty, Maleficent, her persona, you don't really care why she's so determined to kill the princess. We just accept it and move on because she's such a scene stealer, you don't care. And I
Yeah.
feel like technically you could say this movie does the same thing, but because, I think mainly because there was no music, and I felt like this movie kind of felt empty to me because of that. I
It
felt like I
you
it just
you
made me
needed
want
something more.
more.
Yeah. I
Yes.
no. I can totally get that. And yeah, no. This movie.
But I agree, he gave a great performance, and the story didn't go in a direction that it would have made sense for us to get a why. But
Yeah. It was pretty much just kind of like, you needed to take kind of everything for face value with this movie. It didn't really
yeah,
need. It didn't really give any like exposition on like the past or what will happen in the future, other than just like some superstitious stories that we kind of get by the villagers kind of in the beginning of the movie when Renfield first shows up. It's like, oh no, he's a vampire, like don't go there, like they'll kill you. It's like pretty much like outside of that and like a couple other like things of like random like superstitious stories. And I think Van Helsing kind of does does a little bit of like monologuing a little bit. We don't really get any external exposition from the movie on any of like the major motivations, other than just seeing it in progress, or in the steps of it about to happen. Um, which
yeah,
I'm kind of for that. And for old movies, they had a very short runtime. It was basically just going to like the theater to see a play, which kind of went from like a couple hours to like 1 to 2 hours. So like this movie kind of had to be kind of within that same time frame, more or less.
yeah.
So they really didn't have a lot of room to add anything else rather than this is what's happening right now. This is what you need to know. Let's go, and just kind of rapid fire it. You know?
Yeah. Um yeah, and I agree, and it's like I get it. I totally get it. It's just it it was something, it bothered me, but again, like the movie didn't really, I think it bothered me just because it bothered me. It wasn't that it wasn't the movie itself that presented things in a way that made me think like you're doing it wrong. Like no, it was nothing, there's nothing inherently bad about this movie. Um it is very, it is like, it is pretty unique for what
Yeah.
it is, and the
I
timing especially.
Yes, and like the cinematography of like them just kind of like like on the stagecoach drive up to the castle, I think is a
Yeah.
phenomenal shot. Like not just for like a horror movie standpoint, but just from a movie standpoint, especially for the time, because like he's driving a stagecoach on like an actual road, and it's like driving it up, and like the background is like a matte painting of the castle,
Oh yeah,
and then like
yeah.
there's actual shots of them at a real castle that they filmed at, and there's like two different castles. There's like the original castle that the book is based off of, and which is real, and then there's the castle that it took historical inspiration from, which is like Vlad the Impaler's castle. So there's two castles that
Ah,
are roughly
oh.
interpreted and based off this movie, and then a lot of it was filmed in like the Universal Studios like backlot. Um, I just love these types of movies that just have this much amount of like deep like history like rooted into it.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
so this was a real treat to do this. So I'm really excited that you let me do this again for year two. um,
I mean, I liked it more than Nosferatu. Nosferatu, I
I was
remember
just
I actually got up and was like in the kitchen, like still kind of watching, which I don't usually do because I feel I don't like any distraction. But I think I also knew that I didn't really know what was, I barely knew what was going on. That it
yeah.
didn't make a difference if I was sitting and watching it.
I was literally just about to ask you if you liked this more than Nosferatu, but you kind of
Oh,
just you just answered that for me. So I guess
we're
just
in
kind of
sync. Yeah.
yeah. So I guess we can kind of just use the same answers that we gave for Nosferatu on if this could actually happen, because it's the exact same story.
I don't remember what I said for.
Neither
I'm
do
assuming I
I.
said no, but
I'm assuming
I
no as well. But
you know, like okay, if a vampire existed, I think um that's the thing, is because of, there was only so much they could do, and they're just telling us like what we're seeing. Oh, like there's wolves, or I think one of my favorite, my two favorite moments in the movie. One of them was when the maid is like, "Mina's dead on the lawn." Everyone's like, "What? What?" She's like, "There." And it's like, I mean, I don't know. I just thought the way she came in delivered it. It's like, and she's not dead, but like the way she delivered it's like, okay, there's a dead body. Maybe a little more fear, I guess. I don't know, but that, and there was a scene when the guy that runs the, was it like the hospital or like the mental institution? I don't
oh,
remember.
Dr. Seward.
Uh, Martin, was that his name?
Oh yeah, Martin.
He, and I think the maid, the same maid, they said he's there like, I think everybody's like crazy except for us two, and he says, and then like he backs away slowly in the dark. And I actually went back and I'm like, wait a minute, did you just back away like for emphasis? Like, um, but anyway, just I forgot about that. But anyway, part of me thinks, I feel like this is, I will say, actually, I'm probably gonna say no. I was starting to think like, could this all happen? But I will say this is something I feel like, no, I noticed with a lot of, this is a cliche of most like horror and monster movies, when the woman, let's lock her in her room so the monster can't get her, but then let's all just be downstairs. Like,
Yeah, let's all be literally
like
anywhere else.
even in like the mummy, like okay, she's locked in her room, but there's people on just outside the door, like, and they're not, they don't know what the mummy can do, so of course that they're not prepared for it and they're gonna die, but like they're right there. They're putting in effort. Like here I'm like, why can't they all just, why can't she just be in the same room with all you guys? Why does she have to be in her room? Because it's her bedtime? Like, she's an adult. Like, I just thought that didn't really make sense. And then I remember the part when like Van Helsing. So, which we didn't really talk that much about Van Helsing, but he's like, he's basically saying like, oh yeah, he confirms Dracula's a vampire. And actually, I do want to say that was another moment I really liked, how Van Helsing finally realizes that
Yeah,
Dracula's a vampire. He sees like it's a tiny, it's not like some giant ass mirror
it's like a tiny
that
little like
everyone could have
handheld
seen.
mirror.
It's so small that only like he was able to see it, that he sees that Dracula is not showing up in the mirror. It wasn't something that everybody's obviously missing,
Yeah,
which
no,
I really appreciated.
like I'm trying to remember. Wasn't like a cigarette box that just like had
I think
like
so.
some
Probably.
like a mirror on the inside, which odd design but convenient for you.
Yeah. Um
Which
but I
by the way, that exact
like that was
trope.
great.
Yeah, no, that reveal is great, and apparently a lot of various directors and actors think that as well, because that exact same like vampire reveal has been copied multiple times in other horror movies, and we might see that at some point this month.
I can think of the only other movie that I saw that kind of reveal was in Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire, but it's a giant, it's a regular size mirror. I
Yeah,
don't get how nobody notices this.
yeah,
Whereas this was really
yeah,
tiny, and it made sense why only he sees this.
yeah. So
Um,
yeah, I guess that more or less kind of wraps up
but yeah, I
Dracula.
guess,
And was
wait, I would say, so yeah, sorry, really quick.
Yeah,
I feel like I didn't clarify. Yes, I would agree. It's probably no, just because I feel like Dracula would be a lot more menacing. If he is this determined, or maybe he's just so confident that he doesn't need to, he's not afraid of stuff.
I feel like he's just like
Probably
very
that one.
confident. I mean, he's like
It's
over.
probably that one.
He's an ancient vampire who's lived like I think that he's like 500 years old. That's what I've read, that he's like that old. So it's like he's dealt with,
So I guess,
yeah,
okay,
he's dealt with
it's
generations of like potential vampire hunters. Like what is this one guy gonna do that all the others haven't already?
so it's less of him getting to her and more of everyone else's behavior interaction. Like Van Helsing's like giving them all information, like, oh yeah, no, it's like you're telling him what to do, and then at the very end though, when after he kills the he we don't, again, we don't see him killing Dracula. We just hear the Dracula going like and
Yeah,
then John gets Mina out of there, and then he's like, "Okay, I'll be right behind you." And I'm like, if this was any other movie, I know he would have been like, he's hiding something, or he's doing something else. Nope,
movie's
he's
end.
just right behind them. Yeah, so I kind of want to say, yeah, it's probably wouldn't happen, just because I feel like everyone would be, at least Van Helsing was pretty useful and pretty smart, but he should have even been like, maybe let's not lock her up in her room with her own balcony. Let's just keep her down here. We can keep an eye on her.
But then the
But
movie
yeah,
can't
that wraps.
happen, Sam.
But yeah, I guess that wraps up
Yeah. So,
Dracula.
how would you say that you like this, and like comparing this to like other like vampire movies that you've seen, like how does this one hold up?
Keep in mind, I haven't really. I think I
Oh, okay, okay.
excluding Twilight and Mom's Got a Date with a
Okay,
Vampire.
hold on. I'm gonna stop you right there. How about we'll
I don't think I've seen any vampire.
oh,
And okay, I guess Lost Boys is the only other vampire movie I've seen.
okay, so hold up. Why don't we hold off on this question until the end of the month, and we'll see
Okay, you're
after you've
asking
got
me, and I'm like,
yeah, after you've kind of
okay,
seen a couple other vampire movies to kind of compare to, we'll kind of revisit
that,
this question. Does that sound good?
that makes more sense.
Okay,
Because
we'll
I'm
save that
like,
till the end of
I
the month.
I can't really answer this question
Okay.
because I have to be honest. I thought Twilight was a little more fun, but also,
Also,
yes, I
those
agree.
aren't
That's
real
not really a.
vampires.
I know, I
No, the
know. That's
vampires
not
from
really a
Twilight are
good.
just they're
That's not.
fairies. Those are just straight up
That's
fairies.
not a. that's not a good example, which is why I wasn't going to bring it up.
It's not.
But
It's not an example at all because they're not vampires. In my opinion, the vampires from Twilight are not vampires.
I mean, they're no, but like
They are
they're
no.
just
They're just
it's
no. They're
it's
just
it's
they're out.
completely
They're
not
they're
made. It doesn't come from any lore. That's the thing. It's just
no.
completely made up, which was part of the fun. But yes, I agree
Yeah,
that they're not.
yeah. No, they're not
Yeah.
vampires. They're albino fairies that sparkle in the sunlight that just happen to like to drink blood. That's just what they are. They're albino fairies.
Albino fairies. But yeah, I think compared to well, no, I
Yeah, yeah.
preferred Lost Boys, but
We'll say
again, like I can't
we'll save
answer
your
this
answers
question.
till the end of the month. With that being said, where can these lovely people find our spooky episodes of last year, as well as our other fun episodes?
You can find everything on pretty much wherever you can find podcasts, like Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Overcast, Google, um, YouTube. Um, Follow us on Instagram, and and also subscribe to us. On anything, anywhere where you're listening to us. Make a comment. That'd be nice. And yeah, so we're gonna keep talking vampires throughout October. So this is gonna be fun.
Yeah,
It's gonna be a fun
I'm
month.
really looking forward to this. This might not We're not necessarily going to be going in chronological order, so we're going to be kind of jumping around throughout the decades with vampire movies, but I felt like we really needed to start off with the granddaddy of them all, Dracula himself. So
Yeah,
this was a really fun episode to doing some research on this, and I cannot wait to talk about some of the other ones that we have in store for you guys. So until then, I'm Kevin Tracy,
I'm Samantha Tomlinson.
and you've been listening to Movie Reel. Goodbye.